it's been a current refrain, and it hasn't gone away, that we have been beastly to people in the past. No, I'm not talking about the 19th century, and no, I'm not talking about genocidal attacks on the Chatham Islands or anything like that. Nope, I'm not talking about Parihaka, and nope, I am not talking about Te Kuti and a whole series of, historical events that 19th century people did to each other in New Zealand. I'm talking about just at the end of last century and even into this century, that people who came from straitened backgrounds, or in many cases their parents were mad, drunk, drug addicts, or alternatively there was something that required them to go into state care, that they were poorly treated by the people who were responsible for their treatment. And whether it was at Dilworth School as an example, and only as an example, because Dilworth was not the worst of it, believe it or not, or whether it was in state institutions like Lake Alice, where children who were deemed to be either troublesome or mentally addled were subject to electric shock treatment and the likes. It was young ladies being raped in girls' homes by staff as much as other inhabitants of those particular homes. There have been some appalling treatment of people who are still alive and who have had to live and cope with that treatment over the years. Well, that was what the Royal Commission on State Abuse was all over. It came out with a series of recommendations, and a number of things have fallen out from there. One of those is Una Jagos, the Solicitor General, who did not make people happy on the platform with her prosecution guidelines, now in the firing line for her and her Crown Law Office having sought to frustrate and fight the legitimate claims of state awards who were abused, and who even after the Crown was aware that they were abused still fought to keep information, the facts, and some even acknowledgement that these people had suffered through state care. Well, then there is obviously the second other one, which is to do with compensation. Okay, so how do you make things right? There is meant to be an apology that's going to take place relatively soon. I think that's this month, actually. Although not everybody's going to be apologised for it. It seems just a representative sampling of those who've been abused. And then there's the issue of financial compensation as well. Now, one of those who's been very much involved, we've talked to her before, is lawyer Lydia Oosterhoff, who has represented or taken class actions on behalf of many of the victims of survivors of abuse in state care. And where we are now, where we're headed, and why she's not very happy, we're about to hear. Lydia joins us now. Lydia, lovely to have you on again. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Have I got that right? There's an apology due this month. Is that the idea?
Next Tuesday, actually. So, yes, Tuesday there will be an apology in Parliament. About 180-something survivors have been pretty much balloted to be able to attend that. There will also be 3 public screenings at venues in Wellington, Christchurch and Auckland, and the apology will obviously be live streamed on parliamentary television.
Roughly how many survivors of abuse in state care are there in New Zealand? Still alive?
Still alive. Probably quite a lot less, but according to the Royal Commission, there was around 200,000 to 250,000 people who were abused in state care between 1950 and 2019. So we're looking at massive amounts of people.
Right, but of those who are still alive, that's why I asked that question. The issue of compensation has come in, and you and your partner have been running, Sonia Cooper, have been obviously seeking some form of compensation for those who have been damaged, and many of those who have been so damaged in their childhoods or their adolescence that's affected every part of their life. And I assume if they've got children, their children's lives as well. Could I ask you this one?
Yes, we've been fighting for years and years and years for compensation for people. And
right, but the reason I've asked this is because it's obviously unbudgeted, but the highest payment you're saying for serious sexual and physical abuse as a child can get under the Ministry of Social Development's framework is $30,000 total. Is that right?
So the Ministry of Social Development has 2 frameworks. So it has the rapid payment framework, so that the maximum someone can get under that is $30,000. So the rapid payment framework doesn't take a survivor's allegations into account. It only looks at the amount of time that someone was in state care, whether they were at a bush program such as whakapakari, and whether they were placed in a secure unit, and cumulatively takes, so someone who was known to social welfare and social welfare care for more than 15 years will get a base figure of $25,000, and then top-ups up to $30,000 for the inappropriate detention or if they're at a bush program, and it caps at $30,000. So $30,000 is, so someone could have been in state care for their whole life, been seriously physically abused, being placed at one of those programs like whakapakari, being held in secure units for months on end on remand, and $30,000 is the most they can get under the rapid payment framework. So there is another settlement framework, the individual claims assessment framework, but that has delays of 8+ years. And again, that can be quite brutal on survivors because it does look at people's allegations, but often if there is no supporting information, then MSD will not take it into account. So, and let's be honest here, if adults were sexually abusing children, they weren't going to write that down. So often we come up against the fact that there's no corroborating information. We're not in a criminal justice system, we're in a civil justice system, so it's a different standard of proof. If we're in criminal law, I completely agree, you need to show that beyond reasonable doubt, but we're not. So unfortunately, even under the individual claims assessment process, the average amount we're seeing is around $20,000 for someone who's spent their whole childhood in care.
I imagine the government has got papers, both the previous one and this one, from Treasury or likes, to do with what the total cost would be to pay out to the victims that I identified. And as you say, it's a civil matter rather than a criminal one. So, have they been? Does it, in your view, does it require every survivor of abuse in childcare to make that particular claim on an individual basis?
Well, so we know there has been a Treasury report. There was a cabinet paper released at the end of September by Minister Erica Stanford that consulted on the implications of an independent redress scheme, which was what was recommended by the Royal Commission in the report that was released in December 2021. So just on that point, this is not just our current government, this is successive governments that have ignored this Royal Commission report. Unfortunately, that cabinet paper was completely redacted, so all we can know is that Treasury has done costings of what according to the Royal Commission, an equitable redress scheme would cost, but we don't know what that says because it's been redacted in full.
Okay. But I'll take you back to the original thought. There's two of us, okay? So this is what you have to deal with as your government, giving out money to claimants. On the one hand, somebody has established beyond a reasonable doubt, not beyond a reasonable doubt, on the balance of probabilities that they have been abused. On the other hand, somebody's just grifting along, coming in and saying, oh, I've got abused too, yeah, because they can suddenly see a payment. Now, I assume you accept that the government's got to make some sort of drafting mechanism for those who are genuinely been abused and those who haven't, yeah?
Oh, of course. And to say that the system as it currently stands, and yes, I can't speak for what a future system might look like because we don't know, is so grueling on survivors is that I think a person would struggle to make up allegations in order to fall into that category. But of course, that's always a risk, and that is why records exist, and we do look at the records and we make sure that people, and if we have real questions about people's credibility, we have the right not to act for them anymore.